Hello everyone, and a very good morning or afternoon depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Annalisa and I'll be your host for this webinar today. Thank you very much for joining us to discuss embedding successful blended learning within institutions and Epigeum's suite of online courses for academic teaching staff. We should be taking about 45 minutes of your time today, including an opportunity for a designated questions and answer session at the end. So firstly, just a couple of introductions. We're joined today by Matthew Newcombe, and I'll let him introduce himself now.
Hi, good morning everyone. I'm Matthew Newcombe, Head of E-Learning at the University of Exeter. I'm also one of the course authors for two of the courses in the Blended Learning Suite. And I'm going to be talking about some of our experiences at the university embedding blended learning.
Thanks, Matthew. And that's me on the right. I'm the Product Manager for Blended Learning at Epigeum, and I work in the marketing team to help universities promote our courses. So just a quick look at the agenda before we get started. First, we'll quickly look at Epigeum itself. We're the organisation that put together online courses through a unique collaborative model. Then we'll move on to Matthew's presentation, who will tell us more about his experience of embedding blended learning within institutions and the challenges and benefits of that. Following this, I'll talk in more detail about Epigeum's online courses and provide a brief demonstration. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A session. So a quick overview of Epigeum. We were founded in 2005 as a spin-out originally from Imperial College London. Our two founders created the company in response to what they felt was a lack of timely support for researchers. They saw this as an opportunity to work with universities to create accessible and interactive supported materials for researchers. And over the years, we've expanded to courses for students and teaching and leadership programs for staff. We were acquired by Oxford University Press almost 2 years ago, and Oxford University Press are a division of Oxford University, so we're a non-for-profit organisation in the higher education context. And we've created over 92 online courses across 23 different programmes, and we currently have 4 in development. So we're an increasingly globally focused organisation and have worked with over 260 universities across 30 different countries worldwide. And this is a map to show you of the international spread of universities using our courses. And now I'll just show you a short video which will explain our development process to you.
The story of an Epigeum course. We come up with an idea and we consult widely to develop and fine-tune it. We commission a team of expert authors to write it and a team of expert reviewers to help them. We commission a lead advisor who gives strategic vision and leadership. And we bring together a team of universities who form a development group to give feedback on our plans and prototypes and to make sure the product meets their needs. The collaborations we build are drawn from across the world and often involve input from over 50 academics, as well as our team of in-house specialists. Because we believe that collaboration and iteration are the key to producing truly innovative and effective products. So we bring everyone together for a launch workshop at the start of each project. It's a great mixing pot where the creative juices can flow and expertise can be shared. We provide a week-long training course for our writing team to make sure they're able to get the best out of the online medium. And we provide plenty of opportunities for sampling and feedback along the way through a detailed peer review process. In fact, a typical product goes through at least 5 iterations before it's ready to be built by our in-house developers. Together, we're more than the sum of our parts, and our unique and rigorous product development process gives all collaborators access to groundbreaking courses they couldn't have created alone. Here's what...
Just to summarise the content of the video, here are a couple of bullet points. The development group of universities usually come together and share their experience at a workshop to help us create a really great online course. We recruit authors, all under the guidance of a lead advisor, and the advisory team we put in place lead and shape the vision for the programme alongside our team. We have a meticulous review process which allows the development group to look at the content of the courses, check that it matches their expectations and comment on it as well. And then the development group of universities are the early adopters who get to use the programme and implement them at their universities. And we make it available to other universities on a licence basis. So I'd like to briefly touch on implementation here, which is just how the course can be used at your institution. And this is in a number of different ways. So firstly, it can be used as a standalone academic course. You can supply the participants with an online multimedia-rich course immediately at the time and place they need it. And so this would be a self-study mode. Secondly, we have the option for tutor-supported online courses. And finally, it can be used as part of a blended programme. Typically how this works is participants are given access to the online course ahead of a workshop, and then the workshop would really focus on consolidation and application of the material. And they can also be implemented in all three modes at once. So hopefully that's given you a bit of background to Epigeum and how we put the programs together, and I'd be happy to take any questions on that process, but for now I'll hand over to Matthew.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to talk a little bit today about the experiences we've had at the University of Exeter developing and implementing blended learning. The University of Exeter is based in the southwest of England across three main campuses, two in the city of Exeter and one in Penryn, Cornwall, about 100 miles away. We've got about 22,000 students split between undergrad, postgrad taught and postgrad research. And the university is pretty much a traditional campus-based destination university. The experience of students is still very much orientated around being on campus and actually learning with their peers as part of the community. But the key thing that we're trying to do is actually embed blended learning into our new and existing curriculum to actually enhance the student experience and take that into a new way of actually delivering the learning. So I thought I should probably just start with a definition that I use in my work here with my colleagues and how I present blended learning to them. And this definition talks about how blended learning is this thoughtful fusion of face-to-face and online experiences. And for me, that's a really important aspect of what we're trying to do, in that we're not making a very hard definition to say blended learning is this. Blended learning must use these technologies. Blended learning must be delivered in a certain way. And that's something that you should have a think about, is actually look at the different definitions of blended learning and come up with something that works for you in your institution and helps to articulate what you're trying to achieve yourselves. So why implement blended learning? Well, there are numerous benefits for it around enhancing the curriculum. So how do we take the teaching that we're currently delivering to our on-campus students and enhance it through the blend of technologies and face-to-face work? We can encourage new assessment practice supported by technology, perhaps facilitated out of formal learning spaces. Promote innovative new teaching approaches and actually think about what we can do different through the blend that we're going to create. How do we change the way that we actually teach to make it better, to deliver it in new ways to our students? That in turn can change how you think about and use your physical learning space. So there's an innovation process there as well that needs to be thought through. How does that physical learning space change to take account of the new adoption to the curriculum? And through that, the technologies become embedded, and through that, we get innovation and enhancement in teaching practices. And those are some of the benefits that blended learning offers. So what did we do? Well, we had a number of approaches that we adopted at Exeter. And this is something I would certainly recommend that you think about, is that having a widespread approach to adopting blended learning works very well. So we had very top-level senior management support, which I think is very important to actually have that senior champion in the institution, a very key academic who's respected and known by colleagues, who actually helps to champion it, to talk to people, to encourage them to think and experiment. But we equally had work at much lower level with academics at their programme teams. And we have early engagement with their curriculum design. When we know a new programme is being developed, we can work with that team to help shape it, to think about the differences, to think about how we can blend it and make it sometimes more effective, sometimes very different, but certainly an effective way of delivering that new programme. That early intervention is also very key to ensure effective technology alignment. And this is something which I think is very important to always bear in mind with this, that technology does not lead the way that the curriculum will develop. Technology becomes an enabler to that curriculum and enables the delivery and the assessment to be effective. But it certainly shouldn't lead how that's going to go ahead. And out of that work comes very focused staff development opportunities to actually develop the academic teams, the support teams, to think about how we can help them develop new ways of working, to use the technology effectively, to develop their own digital literacy, and to make sure it works. That's supported through a number of demonstrations. We have to look at the best practice and share that across the university within our peer group. And that can be done through a number of staff champions who are actually telling their colleagues about the benefits that have been offered to them, and equally from students. Our learning space refresh takes account of these changes of within the curriculum that we want to bring in, and that looks at both the physical space and the type of technology that we may need within them. And we also have a number of engagements through our students through a process called the Change Agent projects, where students start to become owners of their learning and co-creators of learning, and they bring an awful amount of expertise to the table for our staff to help them think about what could be different, but equally look at the types of technologies that can help support the way they're going to teach. So what's worked? Well, engagement at an early stage is absolutely critical. Thinking about new program design and actually having the discussion about how can we blend this program, how can we change the way it's delivered, what type of technology can come into that to actually help us. Where do we maybe take something from a face-to-face delivery to an online delivery and build that as a core value into that curriculum? Engagement and support to help with transition, and this is a very important aspect of this, but actually for some staff, changing their teaching practice can be quite a challenge. It can be quite a frightening experience. So helping them through that transition period to understand where they're going to go, how things may change, enable them to be able to use that technology well, and understand how the assessments work is really important. So making sure there's enough support around the teams that are engaged with this. That comes through modelling good practice, senior management leadership, and the staff development sessions I mentioned earlier. And all of those things, when put together, we found were very, very powerful in helping across the institution for this to start to be rolled out. But there's always challenges, and this isn't always an easy process. So the ones that were very apparent to us were initially around staff and student digital literacy. So there were barriers here in terms of enabling the curriculum through technology that we needed to overcome. We needed to help staff and students develop their own digital literacy and their digital knowledge, their competency, so that they felt very comfortable using new technologies in their teaching practice and also for their learning. We also realised that a whole-scale approach to curriculum change is actually very challenging, very difficult to do. But adapting that in small incremental ways actually helps to take this in a much easier way to adopt. So small incremental changes were very, very useful to think about one or two things that could be changed and then build on that as we went through. So whole scale was challenging. We also needed to invest in some teaching spaces and also the appropriate technologies. New technologies were identified that we wanted to use, so we needed to think about that strategic institutional investment to actually make it work. But also, sometimes innovation and risk-taking are frowned upon. And then when you're looking at blended learning, some of those risks need to be thought through. They can be managed risks, but actually innovation is very powerful. Innovating with teaching, thinking about new ways of working, adopting your curriculum in new ways can be very empowering. So I would certainly say think about how you enable that innovation and how you enable staff to feel they can take some of those risks. So first way we started thinking about this was through the strategic drivers. What happens at an institutional level that can enable and empower staff to feel they can do that? And for us it was through our education strategy. And the education strategy was built around 6 main aims, and aim 5 of that talks about how first-class education and technology come together, with 3 aims: to ensure all students are taught by the very best educators, providing inspiring, challenging and innovative learning, to make available the best learning spaces and technologies, and to equip staff and students with the ability to use those technologies effectively for learning and educational success. And that starts to summarise our aim over a 5-year period of time, where we want to get to with this, to a situation where technology becomes embedded in our curriculum and the staff and students feel empowered to use that, but equally that's it change the way that we conceive our curriculum in this blended approach and actually do it. So the education strategy was our core driver that is being embedded into all of this work. If you'd like to have a look at it, the web address is at the bottom of the slide. There are also examples there that I'll talk about later, but feel free to have a look and look at some of the work we've done around that. And these slides, I believe, will be sent out with the recorded webinar after we've finished. So we had our strategy in place, we had our teams in place, we had the top-down approach in there, but we also needed to work at the curriculum level. So how did we start actually changing and thinking, conceiving the curriculum in a new way? So we worked with a number of program teams on new courses that were being developed, looking at small steps and incremental changes. How could we change the teaching practice for this new curriculum by thinking about maybe replacing some lecture sessions with some online content? Perhaps we could record those lectures using the lecture capture system and use that in a more innovative way. How did we need to develop their digital literacy to help them do that? And in many ways, the use of lecture capture is probably one of the main ways that that can be embedded in a very, very quick and low impact way. And that's certainly our experience at Exeter. So we have lecture capture across all of our main rooms. So a lecture being given to a group of students is going to be recorded. How do we use that to actually support the student learning before the lecture, after the lecture, with their peer groups to enable discussion? And that's been a really interesting journey for us to look at how that technology actually helps us adopt a new blended approach. But we have to think about how do we then enable this to happen in our learning spaces. And for us, we have a very traditional campus-based experience. In the picture is shown our largest lecture theatre at Exeter. It's a 340-seat lecture theatre. Oh, sorry, 430-seat, I've got that the wrong way around, lecture theatre, where the majority of students will go for some of their courses as they study through the university. But we wanted to be able to use that lecture space to adopt blended learning as well. So we thought about a number of different ways to do that. We put power and data to all of the seats, so students can take their devices in, their laptops, their mobiles, their tablets, and still use them as part of that experience. We put voting devices in the room so we can get students to start to feed back and interact with the lectures. But equally, we wanted students to have social discussion in a large lecture space like this. So every other row of chairs swivels, and we can get students to turn around and form groups and have discussions, but equally then use technology to feed that back to the whole cohort in the room, maybe using feedback technology, quizzing technology, voting technology. And that has worked very, very successfully on a very large scale. But equally, this is a very traditional type of teaching space that students will experience certainly in our university. And we wanted to think about how can we enable and change these spaces to help us deliver a much more blended experience. The next slide shows the room as it is now. So we've reconceived this teaching space to change the way that students interact with the learning in there. And this really helps us to deliver a very blended experience using technology in a face-to-face way in that classroom. So the tables are now clustered around a series of screens. One of them is a touch screen, one is a display screen. There's a computer on that table, but equally, as you can see in the photo, students can bring their own devices in and interact using their own technology in that space. But the very powerful thing about this is because of the way we've designed it, when we're thinking about how we may change the way we teach, instead of just being delivered to that group of students, we get the students to participate. So as you can see here, they're on their feet, they're using the touch screens, they're thinking about challenges. So we've changed very much the way that room is used to deliver a blended experience. I talked about earlier about sharing good practice. And this was something that was really important to us, to enable our academic colleagues to share what they were doing, what worked for them, how did they adopt their own teaching practice. How did they change their assessment? What type of technology had they used to actually enable this blended approach? And so on the Education Strategy website, there are a large number of case studies, videos, text, written case studies for lots of different practice in different subject areas across the universities. And this has been a very powerful way for us to actually engage everyone in this conversation about what blended learning is to them. How have they taken that definition, this thoughtful fusion of face-to-face and online, and what have they done in their own subject area or discipline? Hopefully we have a video now from one of my colleagues. This is from Damien Mansell, a senior lecturer in geography, talking about how he has developed his own approach to blended learning in a flipped classroom model.
In a computer environment. One of the other ways I adapt technology is by flipping the classroom pedagogy, where the learning takes place before the class using material which I've prepared, such as a video, some reading, a web application, and then I use the formal contact hours to get my students to engage in a discussion, maybe a test, a seminar, and students apply their knowledge, and also I can provide them feedback within that learning session.
Damien was explaining there how he uses the learning space to actually enable those discussions to take part, and how he can actually change the way he delivers the content, the learning aspects of a face-to-face session through a video. And for him, that's been an incredibly powerful new way of using his teaching time, enabled by technology, but also empowering his students to still engage in that discussion. So does it work, and has it worked? Well, yes, it has. It's now becoming embedded into our core practice at Exeter. We have technologies now that have been adopted across the university that are helping these changes to take place. And we're seeing very much that when staff are thinking about new courses that they've been asked to develop, that they have the conversations around how do we blend this, how do we embed the technology, and how do we change the way we teach. We are also seeing that the use of technology is very appropriate to the need. So technology is not the driver for the change to the way we're blending the curriculum. Technology becomes an enabling factor, and it's going to be enabled through a technology which is both appropriate but equally known by that set of teaching staff and they feel comfortable with using. We've also seen that investment in learning spaces linked to the ambitions to embed blended learning have worked very well. Those changes to learning spaces are now being thought through in our refresh programme, so we make sure that it's technology enabled, that we've thought about the way that the space is being used and the way that we're going to actually use it for these new delivery models. But ultimately, we have very strong feedback from our students that they like this blended approach to the curriculum. The satisfaction that they have expressed through the formal feedback mechanisms is very positive. So in conclusion, what have I learned about adopting blended learning? Well, it needs thought. It needs to be thought through about how you're going to approach it, what your approach is going to be, and how the technology that you may have in your existing infrastructure can be used to support the new delivery. Start with small steps, identify the quick wins, work with engaged and enthusiastic academic staff, but don't make them change everything. Adopt a new change in practice, maybe using lecture capture to record content to provide to students before or after lectures. That leads into thinking about investment in key technologies. What are they? What are the technologies that actually help you achieve the goal? Can staff use them? Are they scalable? Are they supported? But equally, once you have those things happening, share the good practice and celebrate innovation. Celebrate the new ways of working and the successes that academics have had. But equally, share those technologies or changes to the way of teaching that haven't worked so well and think about why. And ultimately, you need to provide development opportunities and support your staff to change that practice. And that's certainly where the blended learning courses from Epigeum come in, because they can help take staff through that journey of innovation and change and adoption to think about what blended learning means for them. Thank you.
So thanks, Matthew. We've had a few questions come through during your session, so I'll just have a look at them now. Firstly, there's one asking what's the difference between PGT and PGR?
Oh, sorry. PGC is our postgrad taught, provision, and PGR is our postgrad research.
And then using spaces, when the institution has no funds to obtain all the equipment essential, can he still utilise this space to promote blended learning?
Absolutely, and I think I've probably shown the higher end of investment in those learning spaces. Actually, any learning space can be adopted. One of the things that we've thought about is very simply, how do you set your room up? How do you put the chairs, the tables, the benches in there? There are very many ways that you can actually blend in a traditional learning space. And equally, you don't have to always bring technology into that space. The technology might be something that students have on their smartphone or their laptop or is already in that room. Investment, I guess, is one of the endpoints that you get to with blended learning, because actually that investment will become apparent through that change process, but it can be a very long-term thing to think about. And this is really where getting those cohorts of staff thinking about their practice is really important, especially sharing good practice. That knowledge of how they teach and how they want to change their teaching, and also what's worked in those spaces, will help to actually adopt the new ways of working. So I guess, yeah, you're absolutely right. Investment is difficult, and if you haven't got the investment, blended learning can still be incredibly effectively adopted, just thinking through actually those changes that you want to put in place.
Okay, and finally, what would be a sustainable way to embed blended learning in communication subjects that require face-to-face presentation to a live audience?
To a live audience, it's a really interesting idea. So if we think about a large lecture experience, it's traditionally delivered face-to-face. That can be blended in some fairly subtle ways. So voting technology is an interesting one. You can ask your students to stick your hand up, answer questions around the room. Some students find that quite challenging. Others may not want to open up in a large space. So voting technology and feedback technology, there's a number of free products on the internet now, and if you have access to mobile devices or laptops, possibly even hardware voting devices, that can be a very simple way to change that particular practice. As I said, lecture recording is a very interesting one. Again, it requires investment, but that is something that will initiate change in some of those traditional ways of teaching. But it's going to be very much down to the institution, your own situation, your own academic colleagues, and equally the subjects being taught. But that's that sort of thought process that needs to be initiated. As I said, though, start with small steps. Don't try to do something whole scale. It's much easier to start with something simple. Does it work? Carry on, find something else that may sit alongside it very well.
Okay, thanks Matthew. We've had a few more come in, but I'll address them in the Q&A at the end of the session. So I'll just move on. So now I'm going to provide a brief overview of Epigeum's blended learning courses, which published last June, and then provide a quick walkthrough so you can get an idea of the look and feel of the courses. So firstly, what is the programme? Blended Learning is an interactive online suite of courses developed by Epigeum, which examines the benefits and challenges of blended learning, offering practical, innovative and long-term approaches. This enables academic staff to combine face-to-face and online teaching and assessment with confidence, and also to establish best practice approaches. So why did we publish Blended Learning? Well, the transition to online and blended in higher education is on the rise, so universities are interested in increasing the number of blended courses they provide as a way to enhance quality and to respond to student demand for more online course components. Improved blended learning can help lead to improvements in student performance, engagement, satisfaction and retention. There's also a variety of new technology tools available for teaching and learning. However, some academic staff often struggle with integrating technology tools into their existing programs, as well as establishing the most appropriate blend. And training teaching staff requires an investment of people's time and money. In-house online resources are expensive to produce and require a great deal of time and effort. Many institutions also run teacher training workshops and CPD schemes, but they are time and resource intensive and hard to scale up. It's very difficult to reach the majority of teaching faculty, as they can often be spread across many departments, schools and campuses. So who is the course for? Well, it's for lecturers and faculty already or about to use blended learning in their teaching and looking to improve their skills and understanding of combining face-to-face with online teaching and assessment. So about the course itself, it's about 2 to 4 modules per course, and it's comprised of 7 courses, with the total core online activities equating to 12.5 hours. This seems lengthy, but the programme is designed to be taken at different stages of the career to foster long-term approaches to blended learning, and it's a resource that can be dipped in and out of at need. Topics include innovating with blended learning, developing and implementing whole course approaches, and building a sustainable blended learning culture. And the material includes around 27 hours of additional supplementary materials as well. So who wrote the course? The lead advisor was Professor Mark Brown, the director of the National Institute for Digital Learning at Dublin City University. Over the last decade, Mark has played key leadership roles in the implementation of several major university-wide blended learning initiatives, so having his name associated with the course was a real asset. A number of expert authors, including Matthew, and reviewers also contributed to the development of blended learning, helping ensure the materials are high quality. And we also had a development group of 12 international institutions who peer-reviewed the courses as they were developed, helping to give the courses an international perspective. So blended learning has a number of fully interactive features and high-quality pedagogy to help promote engagement with the content and encourage self-development. Some of the key features include interactive activities and scenarios, which offer lots of opportunities for active engagement. The course can also be customised to allow the institution to add links to specific policies and contacts to make it relevant to their context. There are video interviews with academics and teaching and learning coordinators. You'll also hear from students and teaching assistants as well. There's also presentational activities to communicate important information as clearly as possible. All of the 7 courses have a practice scenario where users can undertake activities that take key learning points from the course and develop them. Course summary screens tie together the main points, and there's also a course quiz for participants at the end of each course. So what are the learning outcomes of blended learning? By taking this course, teaching staff should be able to reflect on reasons for adopting a blended learning approach, learn how to modify an existing course to embed blended activities, incorporate technologies into their own practice and select tools and functions to help them achieve their aims, and finally consider new approaches to student assessment and the evaluation of blended courses. So now I think it would be a really good opportunity to give you a quick overview of what the courses look like. So this is what the courses look like in our Epigeum hosted system. Many universities choose to upload the courses to their own system, their VLE or LMS, but here's a look at the screens in our portal. So to begin with, every course has a welcome screen which introduces you to the content, and this includes information about the contributors, the course structure, course highlights, and the supporting institutions. So delving into the content itself. This is the first course, Why Blend, and I'll begin by highlighting a couple of features relevant to all of the screens. So at the top of every screen we have a key takeaway, and here participants are made aware of what they should have learned and should be able to do after completing the screen. We also offer an estimated duration on the top right here. Here it's 10 minutes, so that participants have an idea of how long it's likely to take to work through the screen. On the right-hand side of our screens, we have clickable boxes that we call pods, and in this case, there's a couple of useful advice pods here. And then further down, we have a video pod, where academics are talking about different aspects of blended learning and what it means to them. And further down we have a portfolio activity, which contains one of the optional portfolio activities, along with the document to be downloaded and completed. These extra activities don't have to be completed by the user, but they're a really interesting way for the participant to develop what they've learned in the core material and help build up a portfolio. So this screen as a whole introduces the concept of substitution, not simply adding new technologies and pedagogical approaches as you create a blended course, but substituting some of your existing approaches for new ones. So here I'd like to show you an example of an animation that demonstrates the differences between a traditional course and one that's blended, so with lectures, seminars, tutorials, substituted with online activities. And this is an interesting visual way of communicating the information, and it's accompanied by an audio recording explaining the approaches. So I'll just play a short snippet now.
To teach in a traditional way. Over the course of a semester, I'd usually have one lecture and one tutorial a week. But once I started a more blended approach, the structure of my course became more flexible. You can see from the design that in weeks 3 and 9, I decided to replace my traditional lecture with a short 20-minute video clip and then offer a 30-minute webinar using our web conferencing system.
So that's just an example of one of the animations. All of the videos and audio have a transcript as well for accessibility purposes, so you can see here. This screen also features a glossary. So these are the words highlighted in green. You just click on the highlighted terms and a box will pop up giving us that highlighted definition, which is something that is featured throughout the blended learning programme. And then the final activity I want to show you on this screen is a note-making activity. So having seen the animation and working through the following content, the participant consolidates their learning by making notes in the space provided here in response to 2 questions. So they type something in and then they can click to view feedback, and we provide some feedback on their answer. And then you can move through the questions, and then at the end you can view a summary, which is also printable as well if you want to take it away with you. So moving on to another screen, this is from course 4, developing and implementing a whole course approach to blended learning. There's some really good examples of pods containing useful links on the right-hand side. But this course also features a comic strip activity, which takes users through scenario-based learning. So here. So in this case, we can just scroll through and see how it allows users to see how the frameworks discussed on the screen might be used and put into practice. Okay, moving on. This is from course 5, the assessment course, which is redesigning assessment for blended learning. Here we have a Your Context pod on the right, and in default mode, these encourage participants to find out about their institutional or departmental guidelines according to their context in relation to a particular learning point. However, these pods are customizable, so universities can insert institution-specific text or links to relevant resources, so users have all the necessary information to hand. There's also a download pod with a relevant article that users can download. As you can see here, the material also shows those glossary terms we've seen before. As well as what's really useful here is a couple of diagrams that show us a typical assessment pattern. And these are here to illustrate the material needed in order for the user to undertake the next main activity on the screen. So this is another diagram. And then scrolling down, we have this bespoke timeline activity, which was created from scratch by our development team. What you can do is the user can click on these click to edit boxes and type in something about their assessment. And then they can drag it to the timeline below to the appropriate stage where they think they'll need that. It's a practical activity that gets users to think carefully about their own strategies. Again, something very useful is they can then view what they've completed and print it out and keep a record of it for future use. Okay, the final screen I'm going to show you is another screen with lots of practical tips and advice on it. In this instance, it's about surveys, how to create and use surveys for use in evaluating courses. So the useful links and useful resources pods give links to a variety of helpful survey writing tools and information about survey design. And then the text and activities on the main screen are centred around this theme too. So in this instance, this is an example of a flashcard activity which provides information to the user. Users click on the card and it turns over to give information related to the material on the front of the card. It's one of our presentational activities, which is really useful for when the material is to be communicated is quite short. Also, probably the most substantial activity on the screen is this scenario activity at the bottom here, which allows users to think about practical ways their courses are being evaluated by students. It offers 2 scenarios with related survey types, and the second one's about an online survey. And users have to critique the survey style by assessing its qualities and writing their comments in this blank space here. And again, they can click to view some feedback on their answer. It's designed to get the participants to think practically about the best way to write a survey in order to get specific information to help them evaluate and refine their blended learning course. And they can also click through again and view a summary at the end. So finally, just to wrap up, some final points worth noting. All courses have a practice scenario where users can undertake activities that take key learning points based on the content of each course and develop them. We also have course summary screens which tie together the main points from the courses in a more general and summative way, as well as giving ideas of what to do next. And also there are end of course quizzes, which are randomised with questions for participants to take just to check the learning they have gained from the courses themselves. So I hope I've given you a good taste of the programme content, some of the pedagogical features with this demonstration. If you have any more questions, please do note them down now, or feel free to contact someone at Epigeum after the webinar. So moving on to the Q&A. If you have any questions for Matthew or myself, please do type these in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. I think we might have a couple come through already. So Matthew, there's one here for you. Do you distinguish between high-tech and low-tech?
Yes and no, I think, is the answer to that. And this is something that needs to be thought through. Sometimes it isn't the high-tech solutions which are actually the best solutions for blended learning, and there is always something that's much simpler to implement. If I give an example of a low-tech solution, PowerPoint is an amazing product when you start to explore what you could do with it in a collaborative way with students, certainly now with things like O365 and virtual sharing of documents. But actually PowerPoint is traditionally seen as something we just use to present with, but you can do some really good group work on there, collaborative exercises on touchscreens. And so that for me would be something I'd call a low-tech solution. High-tech, going into things like lecture capture, which I talked about earlier, is a high-tech solution. It requires quite a lot of investment, but there are, again, different types of benefits you get from it. When we work with our own colleagues here, we try and get them to actually identify a technology that they are comfortable with to solve the issue or the problem or the new type of working that they want to actually adopt. So we overcome that sort of high-tech technology barrier to entry by looking at the technologies that staff already know, maybe suggesting something different, but asking them to think about it first.
There's another one here. Are we going to be over-dependent on technology?
Oh, that's a really good question. And that's going to be very much down to how you think about using technology and your approach to technology and your approach to blended learning. Certainly the approach we have here is technology is only used where it adds an academic benefit to it. So there's, if you know about affordance theory, that there's actually a known benefit from that technology being used over another way of working. So there is a risk of becoming over-reliant on technology. Certainly you need to put that in the context of your own students, if that's something that they would accept in their learning experience, but you will always have barriers around digital literacy, digital capabilities of staff and students that you need to think through there. One of the key things for me is technology should not lead the way that we educate. It needs to be used effectively, and it needs to be used for a very focused purpose, and that's where blended learning is very effective, because you think about that purpose and the benefit and the activity and the way it's going to work as part of the development process. So I hope, we don't become over-reliant on technology, but there is always a risk that that could happen. I think that's something we need to bear in mind when you're thinking through the process of adopting your curriculum.
Okay, we've got a few more. So how is blended learning useful in designing tasks for students?
With tasks for students, blended learning changes the way we may think about it. So if we look at some of the subjects, those tasks have traditionally happened in fixed spaces where the student has to go to actually undertake something. And so I'm going to give an example of a STEM-based subject, so a science-based subject, where lab work traditionally has to take place in the physical space with those laboratory setups. And there are ways to change that, so actually we can change it, and we have brought in some technology that allows us to run a virtual lab. So students can still do their physical lab, but we can give them access it before they go in a virtual way, after they've been in to review it. So hopefully, that's a way of adopting and changing and thinking through tasks and how those tasks could be enabled or changed or just envisioned in another way, I guess is a way of describing that.
Okay, I think that's all the questions we have at this point. If you do think of anything you want to ask, please email us. These are our contact details on the screen. Some of you may have already been in touch regarding the blended learning courses. We'll be able to give you a lot more detail in regards to pricing or a free trial of the programme for yourself. And I think that's everything from us today. So thank you very much for attending this webinar. I hope you have a good rest of the day, and we look forward to hearing from you. Goodbye, everyone.